Hi there, my name's Tyler and I'm an independent game developer, and today I want to talk about finishing and releasing your first game. I recently finished and released my first game called Shell Kicker. It's a iOS and Android game where you kick a shell to hit a crate, and every time you hit the crate, the shell moves a little bit faster, and the goal is to get as high of a score as you can. This game was a project that I set out to create after having not been in game development for a little while, and I set out intentionally with a really small scope so that I could get something small enough for me to finish. In the past, I had always worked on bigger teams to work on projects, and I had never really finished something on my own. I had only ever released stuff in a group of folks, and it was something that I really wanted to get over and be able to do something on my own and prove to myself that I can actually do everything, to release a game by myself. So I kept the scope of this game small on purpose. I kept it as small as possible. It's pretty simplistic. It's kind of a smaller arcade game, but I did that because I needed to finish something and release it as fast as possible. So some of the goals that I had for this project were: one, release a game, since I had not done that solo before. Two was to do pixel art and animation, since traditionally I have only ever really programmed. I haven't done a ton of art by myself, and I have been kind of out of practice on it, so that was something that I really wanted to focus on, an animation I hadn't done before. The third thing was release on iOS and Android, because even though I have published titles on mobile, on Teams, I've never actually developed and released something on mobile before, and it's just something that I've wanted to try and be able to prove that I can do, because it's always seemed kind of a little bit complicated to me to do that process. And then the last thing was to integrate ads into the game. And the reason for that is because that was something that has also been done on projects that I've worked on before, but it just seemed like something so complicated and something that only crazy programmers could do, that just seemed really out there for me to be able to accomplish. And it's always something that I've just wanted to prove that I could do. So those were the four main things that I set out to do with this project. So I hit all four of my goals. I did release the game. I did do pixel art and animation for it. I did release it on iOS and Android, and I did integrate ads into the project. None of them, except maybe releasing the game, were particularly challenging to do. I realized once I got started that doing the pixel art and animation was actually something I really, really enjoyed. And it was challenging to get things right, but I really enjoyed that process. And integrating ads was also something that's relatively easy, and if you think it's something that you'll have trouble doing, I recommend trying it, because it's actually not that bad. They make it really, really easy to integrate ads into mobile projects in Unity these days. Releasing the game was probably the most difficult part. I set it with this project scoped really small and said, maybe it'll take me a month to do since I'm really out of practice, maybe a couple of weeks. And it turned out to take me, I think, closer to like 5 months to do. And that wasn't because the project was scoped too large. It wasn't. It was the right scope. It was just that I took way too long to do it because I was on and off of the project. I was only doing it on the side while I worked a normal day job, and would lose motivation or be too tired or whatever the excuse was for that day to not work on it. So it took me a little bit longer than I would have liked, but I did eventually finish it and release it and put it on both platforms. So there were three main lessons that I took away from finishing and releasing this game. One, I can actually do this. Two, discipline is key. And three, take my own advice. So to break them down, number one, I can actually do this. What I mean by this is I was really nervous to try to release my first project and try to work on it, never mind release it, because it had been so long. I'd been out of practice. It was a couple of years since I'd last touched game development at all, and it had been more than that since I last programmed anything. And I was really nervous about going into a new project and trying to do it by myself from the ground up. I think that by doing this project, I really proved to myself that I can actually do this, and it was such an amazing feeling to be able to actually release something by myself and prove that I can actually do this. To anyone who's running into the same problem, just go for it, because you can sit there with all of the self-doubt. You can sit there with the, oh, but it's not perfect. Oh, but I'm not good enough at doing this, that, or the third. I'm not good with art. I'm not good with programming. There's so many tools to get around that stuff. And if you don't want to use the tools and you just want to learn it, you can learn it. This stuff is really accessible to learn. I would also recommend when you start your first project to try to scope it as accurately as possible. Try to keep it really, really small. Try to keep it to something that you think you could do in like a month, and then chop that in half, whatever the idea is. It should be dead simple. Shell Kicker is a super, super simple game. There's not a lot of stuff going on in there. There's not a bunch of crazy different supporting mechanics. There's just the one core mechanic of kicking the shell, and it tracks your high score, and that's it. So keep it really small, because you're not going to be able to do a bunch of the crazy things that you might think you can, and it's worthwhile to just take something small on so that you know where you stand, and then you can grow from there. The second lesson is that discipline is key. And when I say this, I mean that if you are going to approach any sort of project, any sort of creative endeavor, you really have to be disciplined when you approach it. My biggest mistake was that I wasn't disciplined enough, and that I would just make up random excuses when I didn't feel like working on the project. It would be, oh, I'm too tired, oh, I don't have the time, I wasn't motivated, wherever it was. And that was a huge mistake, because this was a project that should have taken me a couple of weeks at most, and it ended up taking me several months to finish the project. And I would have learned so much more, so much faster if I had just finished this, rather than floundering around and saying that I couldn't do it because I was too nervous to do it. So if you approach any project, discipline yourself. And that doesn't have to mean that you pull out a calendar and schedule your whole day in 20-minute blocks or whatever. It just means that you have to say, okay, every weekday for an hour or two at the end of the day, I'm going to work on my game. Or every weekend from, 10 to 1 or something, I'm going to work on my game project. As long as you set yourself up in a way where you can adhere to something reasonable for yourself and be able to finish your project, that's all that matters. It doesn't really matter what specific hours or anything like that. And if it doesn't work for you, change it. If you do something and you find it's not working because you work better in the morning instead of night, then do that. Do a little bit of stuff in the morning rather than at nighttime. Or if you work way better at nighttime, do that. It doesn't really matter. Just as long as it's something that you can adhere to and be disciplined about and make it a habit, that's what's important. The last lesson is following my own advice. In the past, I've given tons of advice to students and other game developers about how to approach certain things or what things you should do. Like, for example, make sure that you test your game really early and do it really often. Be objective when you're analyzing data. Try to think about why someone's giving you feedback instead of what they're saying. Make sure that you do some sort of marketing for your game. These are all really important things that I know and I've said in the past, but I just didn't do for this project. And I think that it was fine that I didn't do it, because it was my first project in a very long time and I was focused on other things. I think it's okay that I didn't do it, but in future projects, I really know that I really need to follow my own advice. I need to share the game with other people and test it. I need to try to actually market it ahead of time and have a plan for how to approach that, not just say, I'm going to market by posting on Twitter. I have to actually have a plan of how I'm going to do that if I want the project to actually have more than 10 downloads or something, right? So I would really recommend, as you approach your first game project or any game project, that you listen to your own advice if you're bad at following your own advice, or that you listen to the advice of other game developers who have had these lessons and have made these mistakes and know what things to do or not to do. I would really recommend that you listen to them and not just dismiss it or think that you're not at the stage where you need to follow it, because it's all really useful and you should avoid the mistakes if you can, rather than try to make them yourself. So those are all the main lessons that I learned from releasing this game, and I will just leave you with this. If you are someone that really wants to start your first game project, just do it. go download Unity and just start getting to work, or download GameMaker or whatever it is. There's so many resources out there to help you get started. There's so many tutorial channels that'll help you go through making your first game. Just follow a couple tutorials or something. Anything that'll help you get started. If you're interested in doing it, I highly recommend trying it, at least for one project, just to see if you do like it. And if you do, then you can go from there. And if you don't, then at least you know, rather than forever wondering if you're gonna like it or not. So thank you to everyone for watching. If you're interested in seeing future content from me, you can subscribe, and there will be more videos like this in the future. And if you want to check out the game Shell Kicker, it's on both iOS and Android, and the link is in the description. I also have a link to my Twitter if you want to follow me there and see me post whatever I'm going to post there. So thank you very much, and I hope you do your first game. Best of luck.